Many people say that tourism is one of our biggest strengths, and we couldn't survive without it, which may be not so true actually, though this is likely to increase more in the future. And tourism surely benefits some people or businesses, which is why so many corporations rushing to Japan recently. At least currently, the negatives outweighing the positive in many aspects. So let me share some of the big reasons, and more importantly, what can you do about it as a tourist coming to Japan? Many touristy areas like Tokyo or Kyoto wouldn't be designed for only foreign tourists, but rather coexisting closely. So the streets, stores, transportation or services have been shared and used by the local as well, which clearly doesn't work, especially in Kyoto. A recent survey shows more than 80% of the residents in Kyoto feel in trouble by the tourists. And these are some of the reasons which apply to other tourist areas across the nation. From the residents' perspective, those tourists might be nothing but nuisance. As their frustration building up, some of them even feel the need to move out. Especially Kyoto and Osaka have been suffering from this and losing the human resources, which is not because of the declining birth rates. 地元の方が出て行ってしまう理由としてはどういったことをよく聞きますか？
渋滞する、それから公共機関に乗れない、乗れずに会社遅刻したとか、そういうのが非常に増えてまいりまして、いよいよみんな不満が溜まってきていると。
And this is also a huge reason that many people in Kyoto moving out.
ホテルとかがどんどんその観光客向けのものが増えて、不動産価格が高騰することによって地元住民が住めなくなっていくっていう問題。
The ones moving out in Kyoto mainly have been young people and families who could be huge assets for the city otherwise.
京都は大学がいっぱいあって、大学生が毎年たくさん来られるんですね。で、これがマルスポ来た人間がマルスポ出ていくんですよ、4年後。長期滞在できるよねって思える環境整備をしてあげるとか、やっていかないと、人は減る一方。
Japanese tourists or business travelers also in trouble. We see this kind of comments all the time on the social media today. And especially big cities like Tokyo, the price is rising insanely. Although that may be now affecting foreign tourists much, it's really killing Japanese tourists or travelers.
ビジネスホテルを多く利用する会社員たちは頭を抱えています。
やっぱりだいぶ上がってるんで、会社の設定する金額ではちょっと泊まれない。
1万円近辺のホテルが取れなかったんで、千葉の方で取りました。
普通のビジネスホテルでもやっぱり1万円超えはザラで。
少なくとも京都のような人気の場所では儲かってるだろうというふうに言う人もいるんですけども、
みんなそれ観光で飯を食ってたとすれば、多少観光郊外が起きても許容できると思うんですけど、観光によって生活が成り立ってる人が約1割ぐらい、観光関連全部ひっくるめて1割ぐらいかなと。ほとんどの人たちは全く無関係なお仕事をなさってるので、メリットがあんまり享受できずに、デメリットだけが強調されていく。
Actually, depending on the city or town, tourists not spending much or bringing profits, but just causing trouble. For example, at the famous area in Kamakura by the anime Slam Dunk, many tourists crowded and clocking the street all the time.
鎌倉市は警備員を動員し、注意を呼びかけていますが。
全然言うこと聞かないですね。
車で通るときは人を引きそうになってしまったりとかしますし、とても騒がしくて困ってます。
結局地元の人たちのことを考えないんだよね。
Again, those tourists not consuming much but just bringing trouble. So the local businesses or residents have zero benefits or profits, while some tourists definitely spend a lot. Some of them don't, as this kind of information increased a lot, and I see many traveling on a budget. So depending on the prefecture, the number of tourists not correlated to the profits, which applies to Okinawa, for example. Although the number of tourists growing a lot, the profits not so much. Actually, some of the tourist areas even get bigger loss than profits, and repairing the building or facility takes tax money of the residents. So we might gonna have to pay more tax if this keeps happening more. Not to mention that all these also take the city extra tax or price hike on the residents.
Instead of looking at number of visitors or revenue, why not profit? They're not looking at it now, and they need to, because they need to look at some important costs and leakages. Costs like electricity, water, picking up the beach after the tourists, cleaning up the streets. After all, it's the tourists who are there, it's the locals who are there who are paying the price. by having all those tourists that they have to put up with.
But to be fair, we shouldn't just blame the tourists. More than half of them concentrating only in certain areas or spots. And Japan's failing to disperse it. And that's why most of them don't have enough workers. And possibly not capable of providing the service well. The government finally started to take action on that. But many Japanese people say it might be too late at this point.
明らかに今オーバーフローしてるんで、非常に迷惑をされてると。この3年間に手を打たなかったっていうのは非常に致命的で、結局ね、あんまできてないですね。
And this story tells us a lot. Some people clearly feel annoyed by them. And recently, some cities starting to consider extra tax or fees. But it's been quite controversial among the local.
一緒でいいんじゃないかなって思います。
観光客をどうやって区別するの？私にはわからないよ。
And some people say it's not gonna work to make the situation better.
それをやったからといって混雑が減るわけじゃないんで、高いからじゃあ乗らないんかっていうと乗るんでね、結局。財源確保にはつながるけれども、その混雑が緩和されるわけでは基本ないんで。
To be fair, the weekend wouldn't continue forever. And for better or worse, not so many Chinese tourists coming back at this point yet. But when they do it, clearly it's gonna be over the limit. All these programs might even get worse. And the workers may gonna suffer as much as the locals. Just like nowadays, before the pandemic, tourists were rising a lot more than ever. But when it comes to the workers' pay, it didn't so much. Even to this day, it's not changing much. And that's actually the biggest reason why the industry has the highest turnover rate in Japan. 未だにその低賃金で離職率が高いっていうことをすごく懸念しているんですけども、これにはどういった理由があるか。
これは何かというと、一番大きな理由は非正規をベースにした産業構造だということなんですね。全員正社員で雇いますかって言ったら、そんなことしたら潰れますよね。
Actually, the tourism industry has the highest rate since before. And especially in Japan, there's a quite big disparity between them. Because most Japanese companies wouldn't give any promotion in salary to their non-regular employees. And they're gonna be the ones company cuts off first in case of a situation like the pandemic. So it totally makes sense that not many people wanna go back. But our government's intending to increase even more, which is quite questionable if it's really okay. Do we really wanna grow the industry whose workers mostly underpaid?
だから僕はあんまり観光産業に寄りすぎると市民所得が増えなくなるので、ほどほどにしときましょうと。
Which kind of makes sense that Okinawa has the highest percentage of people engaged in tourism and the lowest income level in Japan. Combined with the highest single mother rate, they have the highest poverty rate in this country.
海外の場合は基本的な仕事プラスチップっていうのでそれなりに稼げたりするでしょうけど、日本はそういう制度もないので基本時給しかもらえないですからね。
Regardless of how great they are or increase in revenues a company made, not just workers' pay doesn't go up, but often not even lead to stable employment either, while they get even busier, working more, or struggling with extra burden.
Like employees especially, they're already stressed or busy, and I just walk in through the door, they're like, oh god, like what is this going to be kind of thing. I sensed all these people working so much overtime.
And some of the Japanese I talked to say, especially the workers are unhappy and frustrated about it, since they are the ones who often have to take care of the mess. 結構見てると京都も含めて多くの自治体ではマナーを認知させようというふうに努力してると思うんですけども、それがあまりうまくいってない理由としてはどういったことが？
そんなことやったって効果なんか上がらないでしょ。大事なことはマナーにうるさい街なんだということを認知させるということが大事なんですよ。日本に遊びに来るのとシンガポール行くのって違うわけですよ。だってシンガポールって我々でもなんか唾吐いたら罰金取られるらしいって知ってるじゃないですか。それってやっぱり行く前にやっぱ構えるわけですよ。そうするとやっぱ行儀良くなるわけですね、必然的に。まずルールを全部厳格化する。もう一つは罰金をしっかりとする。
Which reminds me that some of the people I talked to said, this is why not many tourists feel the need to follow the rule, which may be a big reason that these tourists easily could get away from the bad behavior.
人が並んでるところに誰かが割り込んだら、海外だと、Hey! 割り込まないでよっていう人がいるんですけど、日本人だったらなんかその人を見ますよね。自分の気持ちが表現できないから、 ストレスを抱えてしまうっていうことは。
And the biggest victim for that might not be Japanese but foreign residents. As you might already know, the numbers still continue to grow. And recently, more and more Japanese media are reporting the over-tourism and sending this kind of message to us, which could be significantly damaging the reputation of those who have nothing to do with it. I know sounds crazy, but these people are often perceived as the same gaijin, and we don't really make a distinction between them. That's why the Japanese media concerns me. Let's say we have only 10% when it comes to foreign tourists, and the other 90% bring zero issues or trouble. But the Japanese media rather focus on the 10% and show us them more, as if they were the primary example of foreigners.
なんかこうわざと分けてるような気も、この人たちはこうだ、固定概念とかやっぱりすごく良くないなって分ける分けるってことはやっぱできないんじゃないかな。まあ分ける必要があるのかもちょっと分かんなかったりとか。
The Japanese media does latch onto it. Obviously, we in the West we love talking about migrants and stuff like that, foreign migrants and all that sort of stuff. But we don't really cover foreign tourists doing bad things. Here in Japan, they love it. They latch onto it.
So if you check the comments of those news or article or social media like Twitter, you might gonna react like,
"Holy shit! Did they say some heinous shit?" The comments I was seeing were fucking awful. Holy shit, the open racism was crazy on the Japanese side.
Yeah.
Now that the tourists are coming back, I get the English menu more often and people try to speak to me in broken English. Japanese people tend to use it to talk about all foreigners are like this. I don't think it's necessarily they're trying to be rude, but I think it is a strange mindset.
I think Japanese media is very fake and they only feed you what they want you to see and what they want you to think, and because that's so normal,Nobody questions it.
なんか外国人でも日本に住んだらまあなんか外国人だけじゃなくて人として見てほしいんですけど、メディアとかでもなんか変なことを言われてるからそれをまあ信じてしまう。これがちょっと変わったらいいかな。あとはなんか本当かどうかをもうちょっとなんかちゃんと考えるとか。
Many of the discrimination or mistreatments are often caused by the bad image and assumption. When it comes to renting an apartment, for example, people often refuse a foreign resident by assuming like this. But it's actually more accurate to say like this, because maybe it's not so common among foreign residents actually. But because we don't separate them, you could see the negative chain happening. We only see the bad ones in the media, so that their reputation's getting worse and worse, and thus spreading the xenophobic sentiment even more.
そんなに悪いことだっていう意識はないっていう、まあしょうがないよねみたいな、まあ未だにある。まあ僕は進めましたけど、やっぱそう気にされてる内容が確かめられたのが、日本のある程度こう言葉とかルールを知っているか、そこはまあ気にするっていうことはある。
The prejudice against children might be even more concerning.
日本で生まれ育って日本以外の国に行ったことがなくても外国人扱いをいつまでもされるとか、子供の方が辛い、自分で選んできていない分、そうした状況に直面した時になんでっていう苦しさはあると思いますね。
Anyway, these would be some of the big reasons. Like I said, it definitely benefits some people, but it's quite unfair, isn't it? Because pretty much anyone else in this country does not. So the question is, what are you gonna do about it to make the situation better? Let me suggest you 4 things. Most of the issues we talked about could be improved a lot, simply by dispersing tourists. And I find it unfortunate to see that most of them missing amazing areas, like Tohoku or Shikoku. So I want you to consider going there. Using famous ones usually doesn't benefit the workers. Probably the staff not getting higher pay regardless.
All these international franchises, like a hotel for example, those international franchise hotels, about 16% goes straight to the mothership in the international headquarters, never even arrives in the destination.
Going to local ones, the profit's more likely to reflect the workers' pay. Simply Googling about the manner or taboo in the culture before your airplane landing Japan makes huge difference and doesn't take your time much. I know most tourists might already do that, so I want to encourage you to take a step further. If you saw them not behaving right, tell them not to do it. We need to make them think we're not tolerant. Sorry, maybe I'm asking too much, but I really hope you're gonna consider this. More importantly, we need to work as a team to make the tourism benefit all of us.